Hey everyone. So today I'd like to talk about a topic that sounds quite wonky and boring, but it really isn't. Asset forfeiture. Simply put, asset forfeiture is a law that allows the police to stop you on the highway, typically on a minor traffic violation, find a pretext to search your car, and if they find assets in your car, money or any other kind of asset, the police can question whether that money was legally obtained. And if they believe that it was not, they can confiscate the assets that you have in your car. They don't have to charge you with anything. They certainly don't have to convict you of anything. And once that money has been confiscated from you, if you want it back, the burden is on you to prove that that money was legally obtained. So essentially, you're guilty until proven innocent. And it's been the law of the land now for 30 years. This is an incredibly corrupt, abusive, and unconstitutional law, which has been operating in plain sight now for decades, but particularly within the last 10 years. And what I'd like to do today is offer a couple of stories of asset forfeiture in all their horror to let everyone sort of know what's been going on. And these stories have been taken from incredibly good exposés that have been done recently in the Washington Post, the New York Times, and the Des Moines Register. So case number one, Ming Tong Lu is a Chinese-American restaurant owner from Georgia who happens to be traveling through Alabama on his way to Louisiana, where he wants to buy a Chinese restaurant. He has $75,000 in his car and is stopped by the police for going 10 miles over the speed limit. Rather than just write him a ticket, they hold him, they ask questions of him, and ask whether they can search his car. Now, one of the things about this Chinese American, and it's true about many of these stops, is he didn't speak particularly good English. He had no idea what was being asked of him, but he figured, I haven't done anything wrong. I'm going to let these people search my car. They did. They found nothing illegal in his car, but they did find $75,000. Asked him what he was going to do, and he tried to explain that this was a business money that he was going to use to buy a restaurant. Well, they didn't accept his story, and simply lock, stock, and barrel, they confiscated his $75,000. Sounds like I'm making this up. This is absolutely true. So they take the money, and there is a kind of a joint federal-local program called equitable sharing, where you take the money, turn it over to the feds. The feds allow you to keep 80% of what you've taken, and the feds keep 20%. Now, out $75,000, to his great credit, Mr. Lu retains a lawyer. And I say to his great credit because overwhelmingly people do not fight to get their money back because it's too difficult to get your money back. The time, the expense, the difficulty of fighting the federal government causes 5 out of 6 people who are ripped off to let the federal government keep the money and the state government. Once the facts of this case emerge, and it is clear that they had no right to detain Mr. Lu, no real right to search his car, he was not really able to give informed consent on the search, the Customs Department, who now had control of the money, gave him his money back 10 months later. Was he able to recoup his lawyer's fees? Absolutely not. And what about the restaurant that he was going to buy? Well, that opportunity was long gone at that point. So he was out the restaurant, he was out his legal fees, and all the time that he must have spent over that 10-month period trying to regain his funds. Terrible story. In a second example, Mandrell Stewart, an African American, and his girlfriend are driving on Route 66 in Virginia, not terribly far from where I live. And Mr. Stewart is another restaurant owner. He owns a barbecue joint called the Smoking Rooster. And he's got $17,500 in his car. And let me add parenthetically, because you might be wondering, man, these people are carrying a lot of cash. Basically, the asset forfeiture program preys upon people who live in the cash economy. A lot of the people who are targeted are poor. They don't necessarily have bank accounts. They don't necessarily have credit cards. And they are the natural prey of these police departments all over the country. For example, a migrant worker with a work visa who may be traveling through the United States may actually have $20,000 of cash in his car. But those are his life savings. That's all he has because he doesn't have a bank account anywhere. The police know that. So paradoxically, it's the poor who get ripped off during the bulk of these asset forfeitures. So Mr. Stewart, the pretext for stopping him is that the windows on his van may be tinted too dark. Rather than simply write up the ticket and let him go, once again, the idea is to detain the person for as long as you can. He makes him get out of the car, starts asking him a lot of questions, and eventually narcotics dogs show up. And one of the most important aspects of these sham detentions by police is that they bring dogs on the scene, and invariably the dogs start barking, at which point the police say, aha, the dogs are smelling something. That gives us probable cause to search your car. Often they don't find anything, but they always manage to find barking dogs. They look into his car, again find nothing illegal in there, but they do find $17,500. So they threaten to take his car also, but ultimately give him and his girlfriend back the van, but take the $17,500. Somehow, this guy, who really doesn't know the legal system particularly well, has the good fortune to retain a recently graduated lawyer from George Mason University, which is close by. And this lawyer is looking for cases like this. He accepts a $1,000 payment from Mr. Stewart and agrees that he's going to take this case as far as it will go. So for the next 14 months, Stewart and his lawyer are fighting, not the Virginia state government, but now they're fighting the Justice Department to get this $17,000 back. They go through round and round of legal proceeding, deposition after deposition, and as the facts begin to emerge in this case, it becomes more and more embarrassing for the state, more and more embarrassing for the Justice Department. And eventually the Justice Department says, okay, let's settle this. We'll give you 50% back of the money that was impounded. And to his great credit, Mandrell Stewart says, I don't want 50% of the money that you stole from me. I want 100% of the money that you stole from me. I want a jury trial in this case. So he demands a jury trial, and it eventually does go to a jury. He gets on the stand, tells his story. And once the case goes to the jury, they take 35 minutes and unanimously rule in his favor, give him $12,000 of legal fees. And so it's a great success story, right? Well, not really. He hasn't been able to maintain his restaurant while fighting to get his money back. His restaurant is gone, and now he's a construction worker. So these people lose a year out of their lives, never really get whole, and never really recoup their money. So I mentioned earlier that the police tend to prey on people who operate in the cash economy, who might have large sums of cash in the car. The police in Iowa felt that they had found their perfect pigeons. Two poker players were driving through Iowa on their way to Vegas. If you're a high-stakes gambler, if you're a high-stakes poker player in particular, you need cash. And they had $100,000 in the car. So the police stopped them because the police knew that they were driving with out-of-state plates, maybe somebody who was carrying cash. The police stopped them on the pretext that they didn't use their turn signal when changing lanes, failure to use a turn signal when changing lanes. A subsequent video showed that even that was a falsification by the police, but that was the original charge. Instead of just writing up a ticket, the policeman then says, "Hey, can I ask you a few questions?" All this was recorded on video. "Do you got any drugs?" the policeman asked. "Any large amounts of US currency?" "Absolutely not." "Nothing in there?" "Could I search your car?" "I don't see any reason to. I'm not going to consent to that," said one of the poker players. "Okay, I'm just asking you if I can." "No." So at this point, they've detained the men long enough, just as in the Mandrell Stewart case, that the ubiquitous sniffing dogs show up. And once again, the dogs start barking. The dogs seem to be indicating that you've got something in your car. So they search the car and find $100,000, at which point the gamblers say, "Well, we're gamblers, we're going to Vegas, so we're poker players." Well, as you might expect, that didn't satisfy the police. The policeman says to the pair of gamblers, "I'll be honest with you. We didn't find anything illegal, so you're not arrested, but you are being detained." And what he was essentially saying is, we're going to take you down to the station, and we're going to rip you off for $100,000, and it's up to you. You're going to have to fight to get that money back, assuming that they never would. Well, what they did was they hired a good lawyer. The lawyer got a hold of the videotape, which presented a crystal clear picture of what had happened and all the violations that had taken place. And eventually the state said to the gamblers, all right, we'll give you 90% of your $100,000. So these folks are brazen enough and arrogant enough that they demand a kind of a $10,000 fee to give you the money back that they stole from you. The gamblers still weren't satisfied, and they have filed a civil rights suit with a different lawyer, basically alleging that their civil rights were violated wholesale and that the law itself is unconstitutional. But these examples that I'm giving are just the tip of the iceberg. And since 9/11, where the police were able to sort of rationalize this behavior by saying, well, terrorists are running around, drug traffickers are running around, we have to be more vigilant on our highways. So that's sort of their justification for all this. Since 9/11, 62,000 people have had money confiscated from them without warrants, without convictions, without being charged. That amounts to $2.5 billion. As I said earlier, 5 out of 6 never try to get their money back because it's just too damn difficult to do that. And so we have this sort of modern day highway robbery, modern day piracy that's been sort of operating in plain sight, but we've been letting it go. Well, I think things are reaching a critical mass now where both Democrats and Republicans are beginning to see the outrageousness of this. Just last week, Eric Holder, after 6 years of running this program full tilt, basically said, well, look, we're going to back off and stop partnering with states in this equitable sharing program. Again, all props to the Washington Post, New York Times, and all the other great media organs that have brought this to light. And hopefully, sometime soon, this will be deemed unconstitutional and will never show its ugly face again. I'm Jeff Rowan. See you next time.